During my years as a park ranger, I encountered things that would terrify the most tenacious trekker. However, nothing on God's earth has ever given me as much cause for existential dread as the undertunnels of the Grand Canyon. Those treacherous tunnels were not carved by human hands, and they certainly were not intended for human eyes. I should have left this place long ago, but I'm too afraid. Like Pandora's box, once certain things have been learned, they cannot be unlearned. I feel I have an obligation to stay. I don't work as a ranger anymore, but I still perform a service to the park. I keep an eye and an ear on things. I still hear awful tales. I'm not trying to deter you from coming here. I'm simply saying that you shouldn't ever seek the horrors that hide in the hovels of the Grand Canyon. Most people never stumble upon the tunnels, but why would you take the chance? For the sake of anonymity, I'll refer to myself as Mr. Danger, the Park Ranger, a nickname bestowed upon me by my daughter. On the worst night of my life, I tirelessly hunted for 2 teenage girls who had gone missing. I hoped and prayed for an easy search and rescue job. I feared that I would find 2 injured spelunkers in some hard-to-reach crevice. That was my worst-case scenario. I had no concept of the real worst-case scenario. Traversing the rocky terrain of the colossal chasm that spans Grand Canyon National Park, I found myself looking up at the wondrous walls that rose like earthly skyscrapers above me. At first I felt soothed and comforted by their presence. However, as the sun began to set and my torch became my new guide, those canyon walls shape-shifted into something far more insidious. They no longer felt like warm blankets. They felt like the walls of my coffin. My harrowing thoughts were interrupted by the fluttering wings of a crow that circled above me. I ignored the creature, pressing onwards, but I could feel its black eyes boring into the crown of my head. It was watching me as I walked. When I was a park ranger, I liked to think of myself as a man who had a strong affinity with all animals, but that cawing crow evoked a frightful feeling in my heart. Even as a whippersnapper on the job, and one who hadn't personally experienced anything terrible, my animal instinct was well honed. Come on, Mr. Danger, I told myself. You're not about to be bested by a crow, are you? What would your daughter say if she could see you now? I clutched my torch tightly in my right hand and started waving it around in a manic, frantic motion, attempting to shoo the bird away. At that moment I was startled by the sudden sound of footsteps from the darkness ahead of me. With lightning-fast reflexes I shone the torchlight in the direction of the sound. Somebody emerged from the side of a rock, and their flashlight came into view. "Steady, it's me," Jack cried. "I thought you might want some help with the search. Any luck?" "I've found something quite promising." Jack, as I've named him for the purpose of this story, was a fellow park ranger. He was a wizened old fellow, and I always viewed him as a second father figure. He was a little odd, and his jokes often elicited eye rolls, but I'd never been so relieved to see his goofy grin. Hand still trembling, my light erratically danced and darted across the rocks between us. "No sign of them. You scared me, Jack," I said. "It's a good job I wore my brown trousers." Jack laughed and beckoned for me to follow him. "So, what's your promising find?" I asked. "Well, let's just say we should be home and putting our feet up in no time at all. I think I've found the cave system that the 2 girls must have explored," he explained, leading the way. "It's not one that I recognize, truth be told, but I suppose I might be getting forgetful in my old age. Anyway, I'm almost certain they entered it. There was a campfire by the entrance. Recently burned out." I groaned. Last thing I want to do at 9 o'clock on a Saturday evening is fish some dumb injured kids out of a cave. Better than fishing some dumb dead kids out of a cave, Jack pointed out. I solemnly nodded my head, thinking of the countless lives that had been lost in that canyon. Whenever I had cause to moan or groan, I reminded myself of why I'd taken that job. I reminded myself of the people I was trying to protect. Huh, Jack said. What? I asked. As we rounded a tall stack of rocks, my friend scratched his chin thoughtfully, casting his light onto a smouldering pile of sticks. I was looking at the burnt-out campfire as promised, but there was no sign of the mysterious cave entrance. Just a solid canyon wall, as there had always been in that spot as far as I could recall. I was certain that Jack, who was 30 years my senior, had started to lose his marbles. But none of the park rangers had the heart to tell him to hang up the hat. The park was his calling. I know you're gonna laugh, Jack sighed, but I'm telling you that there was a cave entrance right in that very spot, kiddo. I mean, I was right about the campfire, wasn't I? I wasn't gonna accuse you of lying, Jack, I replied. It's dark and neither of us can see out here. Even with flashlights, our eyes play tricks. You know that. Still, we must be on the right track. The campfire is a good sign. Yeah, I suppose you're... Oh. Jack stopped, looking to the side of my head. What? I asked. He chuckled. Got a little something on your shoulder, partner. I swiveled my head to the left and screamed. There, staring back at me with hollow eyes, was the black crow that had been stalking me. It was silently perching on my shoulder. I hadn't even felt it there. It hadn't so much as made a sound or moved into my field of vision. It was a gaunt, ghastly statue, posing with such stillness that it might as well have been a taxidermy bird. Jack cackled until he wheezed and spluttered. He continued to be of no use whatsoever, whilst I flailed around in a mad panic, striving to rid myself of the creature. Eventually, thankfully, it flew away, but I still felt unsettled in the bowels of the canyon. The disappearing cave entrance, the eerily serene bird, none of it sat well. I have good instincts, and I don't fear animals, for the record. I care deeply even for nature's most ominous and overlooked creatures. Crows had never bothered me before that fateful night, but that particular bird was like none I'd ever seen before. I didn't know what was wrong with it, but I knew that the mere sight of it filled me with immense horror. Wait, Jack said. It moved. Suddenly my park ranger friend was sprinting past me, so I turned to see what had stirred him, and then I saw it. On the canyon wall opposite the one we had been facing, there was a cave entrance. It was one I was certain I'd never seen in that area before, and that made me truly start to question everything. Jack, I said, let's just talk about this for a moment. But Jack had already reached the mouth of the cave, and he was jubilantly dancing in the entrance. Before I had a chance to mention the horrible feeling in the centre of my chest, I spotted something that snapped me out of my feverish stupor. Jack, I warned. Wolf. The old man immediately stopped dancing in the entrance and cast his torchlight onto the large grey predator that was slinking out of the darkened tunnel. It did not growl. It did not make a sound. It simply took long, purposeful strides towards my frozen friend. Easy, buddy, Jack calmly said. I don't have any treats for you. I'm not as tasty as I look. Jack, I said, speaking with the same air of calmness, keep your cool. I've been doing this a lot longer than you, kid. Don't worry about... the wolf moved abnormally quickly, pouncing towards the park ranger, who slammed his torch into the animal's face. The creature, along with Jack's weapon, were sent to the ground, but the wolf did not whimper or even falter. It simply clambered back to its feet and eyeballed a now torchless Jack. I shone my own light onto the cave entrance, illuminating my defenseless friend and the unnatural thing that was blocking his exit from the tunnel. "Jack, just let me," I started. "I have to head into the cave," he said. In a flash, my reckless ranger companion had sprinted into the darkness. The tunnel swallowed him, and the wolf pursued with determined haste. Lighting the way with my shaky torch, I, too, entered the cave. I tried to focus on navigating the labyrinth of tunnels, but I couldn't help fixating on the peculiar noises that echoed along its endless passages. Rocks were shifting, as if the canyon were continuously reshuffling and restructuring itself. "Jack!" I screeched. Suddenly I tumbled through loose ground, cutting my elbows on a rocky slope that led down to a sprawling, cavernous opening. I scrambled to my feet and quickly picked up my torch. Jack was in the centre of the room, but he was not facing a wolf. A gangly, ginormous monstrosity towered over him, with the skin of a decaying corpse and limbs twice as long as those of any human. It was a magnified person. No, not a person. A witch. A skinwalker. A monster that I had only ever seen pictured in frightening fables. Not something real. And yet, my eyes were telling me a different truth. I could see it. The thing that goes by so many names in so many different places. "Jack!" I near soundlessly gasped. My friend began to levitate, his writhing body's ascension orchestrated by the gnarled, brittle fingers of the inhuman thing before him. The witch, a silent and serene puppeteer, continued to raise her hand. Utilizing some unseen evil force, she moved my wriggling friend higher and higher into the air, watching his illuminated form in my torchlight. The creature was as still and unwavering as the crow and the wolf, and that was when I pieced the parts of the puzzle together. I remembered the feeling of being stalked by the crow, those beastly black eyes much like the ones on the witch's face. A sudden snapping sound erupted from Jack's body, and he released a scream that ricocheted off the walls of the enclosed space as his legs bent forwards. The bones broke one by one and protruded from the back of his knees as his calves were pulled up to his waist. His jaw started to droop, and I realized that he was moments away from losing consciousness. I prayed that he would faint. I prayed that he would not be awake during his own demise. As the witch began to contort his body into a box shape, my friend's head finally lolled forwards. Looking at his mangled, compressed form, it was clear to me that he was finally dead. At that moment, the rocks on one of the walls crumbled away, revealing a stack of boxes and, surprisingly, a red wooden door. As the witch opened one of the boxes and began to crumple my friend's desecrated corpse into it, I crept around the back of her. She busied herself with the act of packing her latest victim into a wooden gold-lined treasure chest, and she did not seem to notice the torchlight that was moving around her as I inched closer and closer to the red door on the far wall. But as I placed my hand on the door handle, the creature screeched. In a blind panic, I swung the door open and closed it behind me, and I found myself in another long, unlit tunnel, a tunnel constructed of red bricks on the walls, floor and ceiling. This was more than just a cave system. It was, I realised, the witch's lair. There was no way I could survive by going backwards, so I had to push forwards. Lighting the way with my torch, I ran blindly ahead. There were multiple forking passageways. I didn't know which turn to take, but I knew that I'd heard the red door open behind me, and I'd also heard the steady padding footsteps of the thing that had brutally massacred Jack. "Help!" a voice cried from a tunnel to my left. I immediately followed the sound. Cowering in the dead-end passage was a girl. She must have been 18 or 19, fully kitted in hiking gear, and coated from head to toe in blood. "Oh," she whimpered, "we have to get out of here. That thing is coming for us." "Where's your friend?" I asked. The girl's lip trembled. "Alicia, she's gone." "Alicia, so you're Daniela?" I asked. She nodded. "I'm sorry about your friend, but we have to leave." "I think we should go back to the red door," Daniela said. "We know the way back from there." I shook my head, helping Daniela to her feet, and pointed a finger to my ear, indicating for her to listen. I was trying to show the girl that it wasn't safe to go back the way we came, but I could no longer hear the witch's padding footsteps. "What?" Daniela asked. "I don't hear anything." I suddenly realised that not hearing her was far more frightening. "Come on," I said. I led a begrudging Daniela farther into the depths of the tunnels, shaking as we rounded every corner. And then we heard a sound. Crying. "It's a trick," Daniela protested. "Don't go towards it." "It sounds like a girl," I said. "Maybe Alicia's still alive." I followed the sound of the crying, thankful for the fact that the tunnel no longer seemed to be forking into different directions. I was certain that all routes would lead to the same place, and we eventually reached a wooden colourless door. Daniela sobbed and said, "Don't go in there." I ignored her, motivated by a sense of duty and, perhaps, a smidge of stupidity. I burst through the door and found myself in a cavern much larger than the last one. And, thankfully, there was a cave entrance at the far side. It led to the pit of the Grand Canyon. I could see the outside world. It was a horribly dark night, but the entrance looked like a glowing beacon of hope to me. Anything was lighter than the hellish undertunnels of the witch. Casting the torch around the cave, I eventually found Alicia, pinned down by rocks on her arms, tauntingly close to freedom. She was staring blankly ahead, and when she saw my flashlight, she screamed. It definitely felt like a trap, but I wouldn't have been able to live with myself if I hadn't tried. Moreover, my instinct was telling me that I was looking at the real Alicia. It wasn't the witch. I could just feel it in my bones. I darted over to the girl and heaved the rocks from her arms. There were cuts and bruises on her limp limbs, so I hoisted her to her feet. She screeched when she saw Daniela. "Get her away from me," Alicia cried. "Alicia?" Daniela replied. "It's me." Alicia shook her head and gently nodded at the far wall of the cave. I turned my head to see what the girl had been eyeballing when I first entered the cavernous room. I was horrified to see a girl's body on the ground, lifeless and twisted into an unimaginable shape. Not just any girl. Daniela. There were two of them. As I turned my torchlight back to the Daniela who had just followed me from the undertunnels, she nonchalantly unfurled a smile. Alicia and I slowly backed towards the cave exit, watching as the fake Daniela started to grow in height. Her limbs elongated, and her hair fell out. Within seconds, I was staring at the horrific creature that had crushed my friend alive. "Run," I said. As we sprinted for the exit to the outside world, it began to close. The rock shifted, slowly shrinking the hole. Alicia dived through the opening, and I followed. Turning to face the closing entrance, I caught one final glimpse of the inhuman creature, before it was entombed in the wall of the Grand Canyon. I have never told anyone that tale, and though I retired long ago, I still feel that I have a duty to the park. So please, I beg you, do not enter the undertunnels of the Grand Canyon.